Welcome back, everybody. Today I'd like to discuss a question I get asked the most, which is, what gun do I get? I want to get to shooting, I want to buy a gun, pal, what gun do I get? Now that question is so not easy to answer because there's so many things to think about, so many variables to put into play. So I'd like to break it down as best I can, based off my experience and knowledge. And we'd like to be talking about gun types, polymer versus steel, single action, double action, single action only, double action only. You know, what are you going to use it for? You use it for competition, for home defense, for carry, or you just like buying guns. And dive into it as best as I can. All right, let's get to it. Okay, first order of business will break down the guns, or at least segregate them somehow to have a better idea of what to choose. So usually the major differences is, do you buy an all steel gun, like let's say this 1911, or a polymer framed gun like this Glock, or do you get a single action double action gun, or single action only? Single action double action means that the trigger does two things. It can be fired from the cock position, which is usually referred to as single action, meaning pulling the trigger only does one thing, it releases the hammer. And then you'll also have a double action pull, which in turn cocks the hammer and releases the hammer. So hence double action. But some guns like this Shadow 2 can do both. So it has double action and single action capability. We'll get into the pros and cons of that later on. And then you have single action only guns, which can only be fired when cocked, so it only does one thing, and cannot be activated unless you cock the hammer or rack the slide to do so. Alright, and then you have a double action only, which are usually revolvers, but I don't have a revolver, so I'm pretty sure we all know what a revolver looks like. Or a striker fired gun, which in competition is usually referred to as a double action only gun, but it's more of like a 1.5, because like when you rack the slide, usually most striker guns cock, well, I don't know if cock is the right term, but preps the striker halfway, and as you pull the trigger, it pulls it the rest of the way, then releases it. So it's more of like a 1.5. But in competition, it is referred to or considered to be a double action trigger pull. Now, next up is purpose. What will you be using the gun for? So this will narrow your options down. Now, will you be using it for self-defense? But generally, you could use any of these for self-defense, to be honest. But you could break it down more to like, will you be carrying it? Will it be a gun that you'll be carrying every day? Because if you were to carry it, you might want to consider weight to be a deciding factor. Because you could carry a big 2011 like this, but it is heavy. And if you were going to be carrying all day, you might get fatigued, or it might become bothersome. But it is still possible. So it's not like it's not. I'm not saying it's not. So an option like a Glock or a PO9 might be a better option, depending on your size and how you're going to carry it, I guess. Or like my own carry gun, I actually carry a Ruger LCP2, just because I want the least amount of weight and footprint. So I can pretty much cover this thing with my hand. And because it is lighter and easier to carry, I will most likely carry it more often. But that's just my personal opinion. Again, any of these guns can be carried if you want to. There's a will, there's a way. But that might sway your decision towards what gun type to choose, polymer or steel. Now, another thing to think about if it was for home defense was, is it just going to stay at home? Because if it is, then, excuse me, if it is, then a full frame might be a good option because it will hold more ammunition, it will be easier to shoot, and if it's just at home, the size and weight doesn't really matter too much. Now, also, a full frame gun would be a much more fun gun to bring to the range occasionally for range days with a family maybe, or friends. A full frame gun is, I don't know, much more comfortable to shoot, much more exciting, I guess, but that's just me. Again, that's personal preference. So hopefully those will narrow some of your choices down and help you decide which gun you'd like to use for self-defense, or for home defense or carry. Again, ammunition, different gun choices, different guns hold different amounts of ammunition, and that again might narrow down the options for you. So now with another purpose or reason you would probably want to get a gun is to join competitions. All right, so this again will open up a dozen more questions, which is what division do you want to shoot? If you can shoot classic division, you'd probably end up with a 1911 because it's the division for the 1911. Has to be a 1911 design, cannot be a full frame, and it has to be single action only. Well, I don't know of a 1911 that isn't single action only, but if you do, let me know, enlighten me. So this would be an option for that division. If you were going to shoot something like standard division, you'd opt for a 2011, which is not the only option, but it is the most popular option in that division, and you would usually shoot major caliber, which is a 40 Smith & Wesson, and that's more of a points thing. But you could shoot 9 if you wanted to. There are people who shoot standard or limited division using 9mm. But for maximum points and performance, you'd usually want to get a major caliber. So, like I said, this is not 2011 is not the only option. You do have your CZ equivalents, your Tanfoglio equivalents, and you could use a polymer Glock as well. They do come in 40s, so you could shoot that or shoot your 9. If you have a 9, that's also doable. But for standard divisions, like I said, it's usually major caliber 2011s that are dominant in that division, just because of that single action pool, which helps with accuracy and speed, I guess. If you were going to shoot something like production optic light, then you would have to get either the polymers. This doesn't have an optic, but because production optic light will require your gun to be a certain weight, so it has to be less than a kilogram. So most, or if not all, steel options are off the table for that division, so that will narrow down your choices. And then you'll break down your choices whether you want a striker fired gun or a double action, single action gun. Now, pros and cons, it's really just preference thing. I think I've shot both. I've shot matches with a Glock. I've shot matches with this, my current gun. And pros and cons, I guess, is a striker fired gun will always feel a little bit more mushy, and the trigger pull will be a little heavier. Angle on the Glock is slightly different, but that's a Glock thing. The other striker fired guns will be angled more like a 1911. I'm gonna talk about the angle. I mean the angle of the grip. It throws some people off, but I think it's just a training thing. You just have to get used to it. And so it's usually the cons, I think, if it is. But the bonus is you do only have to learn or master one type of trigger pull, because it's pretty much the same trigger pull altogether. It will be heavier, it will be spongier, but if you train with it and get used to it, it won't be an issue. Shouldn't be, at least, in theory. I've shot with it, I've competed with it, and I was able to perform pretty well. Now, double action, single action, the advantages would be that you only have one heavy pull. So one heavy pull when you start the stage loaded, and then after that, subsequent shots will be in single action only, which will mean it will be lighter and a little crisper in terms of how it feels once you take up the slack, and then it's just that little bit of movement to release and activate the hammer. Now, generally, a lighter trigger will be more forgiving, but like I said, it's not like you can't be accurate with a double action, a striker fired gun or a double action gun. It's just a matter of training. But that is generally the difference, is just that after your one heavy pull, all your subsequent shots will be noticeably lighter and, in theory, shorter, but that depends on the gun. So like this one has a lot of slack, but I've learned to just take up the slack. So every time I prep my trigger, hit the wall, and then activate. But other guns like the CCP-10 actually has a really short reset, which is pretty good. But that is also a striker fired gun. So there's your options for that. These guns can also be shot in production. If you want to go production division, of course without the optic, it can be shot in production division. But one of the dominant options for production will be the CZ Shadow 2. And it is also a single action, double action gun. It can fire both. But the big bonus is it's an all steel gun. It's a heavy gun. Now people say like, well, why does the weight matter? It doesn't really matter, but it is an advantage. Got an awesome trigger, really smooth and short, adjustable as well. And the reason why it's one of the most popular ones is because it's packed with features. It's already got a fiber optic front, it's got an adjustable rear, and it's heavy, which helps a lot with, helps mitigate a lot of that muzzle flip when firing the gun. But again, it's not a make or break thing. I mean, you can fire these just as fast as this if you train properly. But, of course, in competition, having every advantage you can get is always welcome. And especially in a division that you can't really modify too much, this is like one of the best options out of there. You also have other steel framed guns like the Tonfolios and the SIGs. But yeah, people tend to veer to this. Plus, you know, it looks sexy. That's one thing too. Preference is another thing to think about. But I'm just showing you some options. For open division, sadly, I've never shot open, so I don't own an open gun. These are divisions I have shot, so I have them. But open guns are generally like 2011s, but they will have compensators, which help again with that flip. Get the gun back on target faster, and we'll run an optic, bigger mag welds, and longer capacity magazines, and those are usually also chambered in 9mm or 38 Super. So, and well, you can buy them off the shelf, like CZ, SDI, all the other brands have open guns, but a lot of people will also have them custom built just to fit, you know, their specifications. But yeah, generally that would what an open gun would be. So if you want like everything you can possibly attach to it, then open division would be your division. Now the final division, I guess, would be revolver, but sadly, like I said earlier, I don't have a revolver, so sorry about that for the wheel gun boys. But yeah, it is a division that you can enjoy, and if wheel guns are a passion of yours, then I guess the revolver is. It's not that difficult to choose, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Then again, maybe there are too many options. I wouldn't really know because I've not dived into that yet. Who knows? Maybe in the future. And that's it for my breakdown as of now. I hope this guides you and directs or steers your decision making for a better to make a better decision, to make a better choice, and hopefully when we get time at the range, we'll make more gun reviews on each gun individually, and let me know which ones you want to go first. I mean, which guns you want me to review first. So till then, I guess I'll see you next time.